Worship is a Christian's way of expressing their love, of respect for, and devotion to God, and different Christian denominations have different forms of worship. For Christians, Sunday is the Lord's Day, the day when they celebrate the Sabbath, or holy day of rest. As such, most churches have their main service on a Sunday morning. Worship will often include prayers, readings from the Bible, a sermon and the Eucharist, with different denominations placing varying amounts of importance on each. Liturgical worship means that services follow a set pattern written out by the Church. Anglican Sunday mornings usually include the Eucharist, and Catholic Sunday morning services always do, and call it the Eucharist Mass. For Catholics, the contents of the service is set out in the Roman Missal, whereas Anglican worship is guided by the Common Worship Book, based on the Book of Common Prayer from 1662. The main Orthodox Sunday service is the Divine Liturgy, which centers on the Eucharist, and it's usually based on the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. Anglican and Catholic Eucharist services share many similarities, such as a confession of sin and request for God's mercy is said by everyone but called the penitential rite by Catholics. There are readings, including the one Gospel reading, and a sermon, with this part being known as the Liturgy of the Word, and the Nicene or Apostles' Creed is then recited. The priest says prayers over bread and wine, called the Liturgy of the Eucharist. Then the congregation says the Lord's Prayer and shares the peace by shaking hands. They then receive the bread and wine, with the Catholics calling this the rite of communion. Orthodox services contain similar elements to Anglican and Catholic ones, with a sermon, Bible readings, the Nicene Creed, and blessings of bread and wine. They include the litany, where the priest says prayers and the congregation responds with, Lord have mercy. Worshippers will sing or chant for most of the service. Services are often longer than most Anglican and Catholic services, and people will stand for the majority of the time. For many, this public worship helps them to feel involved and connected to a wider Christian community. It can also help them feel closer to Jesus as they believe he is there in the church with them, as Matthew 18:20 tells them, For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them. The following of traditions has also helped Christians feel connected to other worshippers throughout history. Other worship is non-liturgical, meaning it doesn't follow a set pattern. For instance, the worship of the Society of Friends or Quakers is usually unstructured, and worshippers sit together is silence, but they are free to pray or speak out loud. Methodist services don't have to follow a set structure, but there is a Methodist worship book with suggested liturgy for parts of worship, including the Eucharist. Their services feature hymns, readings, a sermon and prayers, and while the Eucharist does take place, it doesn't do so every week. Worship in evangelical churches, such as the Pentecostals, is often spontaneous, as worshippers believe they're inspired by the Spirit, and this is called charismatic worship. The Spirit might inspire them to pray, clap, dance or shout, and sometimes they speak in tongues, meaning they pray in an unrecognizable language. Some Christians prefer the freedom of worshipping God in a less structured way. However, others view non-liturgical worship as unsuitable for the level of respect that religious service require. Many Christians also engage in private worship, informally at home, and not just on Sundays. This worship can be anything from saying grace before a meal, to singing worship songs with family, to reading the Bible or praying. A lot of Christians worship both privately and publicly, as the private worship can help them keep God in mind throughout their everyday lives. Some find a greater freedom in private worship, as they can decide how they worship God, and so feel a better connection with Him.